March 15, 2024, Atlantic City Convention Center. Marcus the Mouth. Rodriguez had 37 professional wins and a tongue that never stopped running. That's exactly why Vincent Torino knew the kid was about to die. 3,000 people watched Marcus lean into the microphone. Mike Tyson? That washed-up loser couldn't knock out my grandmother. The crowd laughed. Tyson sat stone-faced at the other end of the dais. Vinny felt his phone buzz. 3 seconds to destroy a career. What happened in the next 72 hours became boxing's darkest mystery. Marcus's sponsors vanished overnight. His gym burned down. His medical records leaked, showing performance-enhancing drugs. Career over. But Vinny knew this wasn't about Marcus. Someone was cleaning house. Someone who remembered 1987. Someone who knew what Vinny had done to Iron Mike when the cameras weren't rolling. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bourbon tasted like regret and burned twice as much going down. Vinny sat in his Lincoln Continental outside the convention center, watching the crowd file out into the Atlantic City night. Through the windshield, neon casino lights painted everything in sick yellows and desperate reds. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Remember when you taught me that betrayal was just business, Daddy? I learned so well. Vinny's hands shook as he deleted the message. 37 years in boxing, and he'd never been scared of getting hit. But this was different. This was personal. The convention center doors burst open, and Marcus Rodriguez strutted out like he owned the world, his entourage trailing behind like vultures following roadkill. The kid was still laughing, probably replaying his mic drop moment in his head. Poor bastard had no idea his career just ended with 11 words. Vinny knew, because he'd seen this movie before. Different theater, same ending. 1987, the Palladium in New York. Another cocky fighter, another microphone, another stupid comment about Mike Tyson. But that night, Vinny had been the one pulling the strings, the one who'd leaked Tyson's psychiatric evaluation to the press 3 days before the fight, the one who'd turned Iron Mike's childhood trauma into tabloid headlines. The fight lasted 18 seconds. The kid's career lasted about as long, and Vinny had made a fortune betting against him. His phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Torino's gym. Vincent. The voice was female, professionally cold. You've been expecting this call. Who is this? Someone who knows what you did, what you really did to Mike Tyson in '87. Vinny's throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Kathy's Psychiatric Services. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison. Ring any bells? You paid her nurse $2,000 for Tyson's file. The one about his father, the one about the pigeons. The world tilted sideways. Nobody knew about the nurse. Nobody except Sarah? His voice cracked like he was 14 again. Silence. Sarah, baby girl, is that you? The line went dead. Vinny stared at the phone, his reflection ghost-like in the black screen. Sarah, his daughter. His little girl who used to shadowbox in front of the TV every time Tyson fought, who cried for 3 days when Iron Mike lost to Buster Douglas, who stopped talking to him when she turned 18 and never explained why. That was 15 years ago. Now she was back, and Marcus Rodriguez was just the opening bell. Vinny started the engine and pulled into traffic, muscle memory guiding him through Atlantic City's arteries while his mind raced. Sarah had always been smart, too smart for her own good. If she'd connected the dots back to '87, if she'd figured out what he'd done. The gym sat in a strip mall between a check-cashing place and a Chinese restaurant that had been temporarily closed for 6 months. Torino's boxing, champions made here. The neon B in boxing had been dead for 3 years, but Vinny couldn't afford to fix it. Most nights, he couldn't afford to keep the lights on. He unlocked the front door and stepped into the smell of old sweat and older dreams. The heavy bags hung like corpses in the dim light. Training photos covered the walls. Vinny with fighters whose names nobody remembered, promising kids who'd never delivered, has-beens who'd never really been. But no photos of Sarah. He'd thrown those away the day she stopped returning his calls. Vinny walked to his office, a glorified closet behind the main floor. The desk was buried under bills and collection notices. The file cabinet held contracts for fighters who'd moved on to better gyms and bigger dreams. Everything he touched turned to ash these days. Everything except the secret he'd buried 37 years ago. He pulled out the bottom drawer and felt around the back until his fingers found the envelope. Inside, a photocopied psychiatric evaluation, a canceled check made out to E. Morrison, RN, and a newspaper clipping from February 12, 1987. Tyson's tragic childhood exposed. I wanted to die when they killed my pigeons. The headline still made his stomach turn, not because of what he'd done to Tyson, that was just business, but because of what it had done to Sarah. She'd worshipped Iron Mike, and her father had destroyed her hero for a payday. She'd known. Somehow, some way, she'd figured it out. And now, she was coming for him. Vinny poured 3 fingers of Jack Daniels from the bottle he kept in his desk drawer and tried to think. Sarah wasn't just angry, she was systematic, professional. The way she'd dismantled Marcus Rodriguez in less than 20 to 4 hours showed planning, resources, connections. This wasn't about justice. This was about revenge. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in sickly red. Vinny heard footsteps on the gym floor. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. He reached for the .38 in his desk drawer. The gun wasn't there. "Hello, Daddy." Sarah's voice drifted through the darkness. "We need to talk." Vinny's mouth went dry, the taste of bourbon turning to copper and fear. In the crimson emergency lighting, his office felt like a confessional booth waiting for his final sins. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. 37 years. Sarah's voice carried the same cadence he remembered from when she was 12, explaining why she wanted to be a boxer. Measured, thoughtful, patient. That's how long I've been waiting for this conversation. His hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the desk. Through the doorway, he could make out her silhouette, tall like her mother, but with his broad shoulders. "Sarah, sweetheart, just turn the lights back on. We can talk about whatever. The word came out sharp enough to cut. "You think this is about whatever, Daddy?" She stepped into the doorframe, and Vinny's breath caught. She looked exactly like Maria had at 33. Dark hair pulled back, olive skin, eyes that missed nothing. But where Maria had been warm, Sarah radiated cold purpose. "You look good, baby girl." His voice cracked. "I've missed you so much." Sarah's laugh had no humor in it. "You missed the idea of me. The little girl who thought her daddy hung the moon. The one who believed Vincent Torino was one of the good guys in boxing." She moved closer, and he saw she was wearing surgical gloves. The detail hit him like a body shot. Professional, careful, planning for evidence. "This wasn't a spontaneous reunion. When did you figure it out?" he asked. "About the nurse? About how you bought Tyson's psychiatric files and leaked them to destroy him?" Sarah perched on the edge of his desk, casual as if they were discussing the weather. "I was 25, working as a paralegal for a firm that specialized in boxing contracts. Found the paper trail during a completely unrelated case." Vinny remembered that day 15 years ago when she'd stopped returning his calls. The silence had stretched from weeks to months to years, and he'd told himself it was about her mother's death, about grief, about needing space. Anything but the truth. "The canceled check to Elizabeth Morrison was still in the court records," Sarah continued. "Funny how you kept such meticulous books for someone running a criminal enterprise. It wasn't criminal, it was business?" Her eyes, Maria's eyes, flashed with anger. "That's what you always called it. Business when you fixed fights. Business when you laundered money for the Torino family. Business when you destroyed a 20-year-old kid's mind for a payday." The weight of 37 years pressed down on Vinny's chest. Mike Tyson was going to win anyway. The leak didn't change the outcome. No, but it changed him. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know what that story did to Iron Mike? How it broke something inside him that never healed? I watched every interview, read every article, followed every court case. You didn't just leak his trauma, Daddy. You weaponized it." Vinny thought about the newspaper clipping in the envelope, about 8-year-old Tyson crying over dead pigeons, about a boy who'd found love in caring for something small and helpless, only to watch bullies destroy it. The parallel to this moment, father and daughter, love and betrayal, wasn't lost on him. You were my hero first, Sarah said, reading his face. Before Tyson, before boxing, you were everything I wanted to be. Strong, respected, someone who protected people instead of hurting them. I protected you. I protected our family. By becoming exactly the kind of man Mama left Brooklyn to escape? Sarah shook her head. She never told you, but she knew. About the fixed fights, the dirty money, all of it. She stayed because she loved you, but it killed her a little every day. The emergency lighting flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls covered with photographs of forgotten fighters. Dreams deferred, promises broken, careers that had ended in this same room where hope came to die. What do you want from me? Vinny asked. The same thing I gave Marcus Rodriguez. The same thing I'm going to give every fighter who thinks disrespecting Iron Mike is a joke. Sarah stood, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd inherited his athlete's coordination. Justice. This isn't justice. This is revenge. You taught me the difference doesn't matter. Results do. She pulled something from her jacket, a small digital recorder. I want you to confess. Everything. The nurse, the psychiatric files, the betting syndicate you tipped off. All of it, on record. Vinny looked at his daughter, brilliant, patient, dangerous, and realized she'd inherited more than just Maria's eyes and his shoulders. She'd gotten his strategic mind, his ability to plan 3 moves ahead, his talent for finding people's pressure points. The student had become the master. And, if I refuse? Sarah smiled, and it was the saddest thing he'd ever seen. Then tomorrow morning, the FBI gets a very interesting package about Vincent Torino's involvement in the 1987 boxing scandal, along with evidence of racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy dating back 40 years. The trap was perfect. Confession or exposure, controlled destruction or total annihilation, just like he'd taught her. Vinny stared at the recorder in Sarah's gloved hands, its red recording light blinking like a dying heartbeat. The ultimatum hung between them, confession or destruction, but before he could answer, his desk phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the emergency lighting like a scream. Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she gestured for him to answer. Torino's gym. His voice sounded like gravel. Mr. Torino? The voice was young, scared. This is Detective Lisa Park, Atlantic City PD. I need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in the Marcus Rodriguez case. Sarah leaned closer, listening. Vinny could smell her perfume, the same lavender scent Maria used to wear. What kind of development? Vinny asked. Rodriguez was found dead in his hotel room 2 hours ago. Apparent suicide. But Mr. Torino... There was a note. It mentions you specifically. The recorder slipped from Sarah's hands, clattering onto the desk. For the first time since she'd walked into his office, she looked genuinely surprised. Mentions me how? Vinny's voice barely worked. I can't discuss details over the phone, sir, but we need you here tonight. There are questions about your relationship with Mr. Rodriguez, and... Detective Park paused. Sir, the note also references events from 1987. Something about Mike Tyson and a psychiatric nurse named Elizabeth Morrison. The world tilted. Vinny gripped the desk so hard his knuckles went white. Across from him, Sarah had gone pale, her carefully orchestrated plans suddenly spinning beyond her control. Mr. Torino? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Can you be at the station within the hour? I'll be there. Vinny hung up and looked at his daughter. The recorder lay between them like a loaded gun, its red light still blinking. You killed him, Vinny whispered. Jesus Christ, Sarah, you actually killed him. No. Her voice was sharp, defensive. I destroyed his contracts, his sponsorships, his reputation. I didn't touch him physically. I would never... Then how the hell does a suicide note mention me? Mention Morrison? Sarah stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the parking lot. Police cars were pulling in, 3 of them, light bars flashing red and blue through the emergency lighting. Someone else knows, she said, more to herself than to him. Someone else was watching Rodriguez, someone who knows about 87. The pieces clicked into place in Vinny's mind with horrible clarity. You're not the only one, are you? You're not the only one who figured out what I did to Tyson. Sarah turned back to face him, And for the first time in 15 years, she looked like his little girl again, lost, scared, in over her head. I've been tracking every fighter who publicly disrespected Tyson over the past 2 years, she admitted, building cases against them, planning systematic career destruction. But I wasn't planning to kill anyone. I'm not. Who else have you been watching? 12 fighters. All of them said something public about Tyson being washed up, a has-been, a joke. I had files on all of them. Had? Sarah's face went white. My apartment was broken into 3 weeks ago. Nothing was taken except my laptop and a file cabinet. I thought it was random, but car doors slammed outside. Heavy footsteps approached the gym's front entrance. Sarah, listen to me. Vinny stood, moving toward her with the same careful approach he'd used when she was 5 and had nightmares. Whoever killed Rodriguez, they're using your research. They know about your investigation, and they're escalating it. But why frame you? Why mention the nurse? Before Vinny could answer, the front door exploded inward. 6 ACPD officers poured through, weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed off the gym's concrete walls. Vincent Torino. Hands where we can see them. Sarah bolted toward the back exit, but 2 officers were already there, blocking her escape. She raised her hands slowly, the surgical gloves suddenly making her look guilty of something far worse than she'd planned. Sarah Torino, you're under arrest as an accessory to murder, Detective Park announced as she entered behind the tactical team. She was younger than Vinny expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Accessory to what? Sarah's voice cracked. I didn't kill anyone. Marcus Rodriguez's suicide note detailed a conspiracy involving both of you, Detective Park said, pulling out handcuffs. Something about avenging Mike Tyson's honor and settling old debts. Mr. Rodriguez claimed you two had been systematically destroying fighters who disrespected Tyson, and that tonight was supposed to be his execution. That's impossible, Vinny said. She was here with me, trying to what, Mr. Torino? Vinny looked at his daughter as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The recorder still sat on his desk, its red light blinking like an accusation. Everything Sarah had planned, the confession, the evidence, the careful destruction of his reputation, had just become irrelevant. Someone else was playing a bigger game, and both father and daughter had just become pawns. The past hadn't just returned, it had brought reinforcements. The Atlantic City police station smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. Vinny sat in interview room B, staring at his reflection in the 2-way mirror while his mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. 3 hours had passed since the arrest, and no one would tell him where Sarah was being held. This was all wrong. The suicide note, the timing, the way everything pointed back to 1987. Someone had orchestrated this with surgical precision. Someone who knew about his past, about Sarah's investigation, about secrets that should have died decades ago. Detective Park entered with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. She sat across from him, her sharp eyes studying his face like she was reading a map to buried treasure. Mr. Torino, I'm going to be direct. Marcus Rodriguez's suicide note reads like a confession to a conspiracy that spans 35 years. According to his final statement, you and your daughter have been systematically targeting fighters who disrespected Mike Tyson. That's insane, Vinny said, but his voice lacked conviction. The truth was messier than insanity. It was personal. Is it? Park opened the folder, revealing photographs of Rodriguez's hotel room. The fighter lay sprawled across the bed, a bottle of pills on the nightstand, a handwritten note beside it. He claims you've been running a vigilante operation since 1987, when you first defended Tyson's honor by destroying a young boxer named Tommy Castellanos. Vinny's blood turned to ice water. Tommy Castellanos. He hadn't heard that name in 30 years. You remember Tommy, don't you? Park's voice carried a strange undercurrent, like she was reading from a script. 19 years old, undefeated prospect, called Tyson a ghetto thug during a press conference. 3 days later, his psychiatric evaluation was leaked to the media. Turns out Tommy had been hospitalized for depression after his brother's suicide. The revelation destroyed his career overnight. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because Rodriguez's note is very specific about your methods. How you buy medical records from corrupt nurses. How you dig up fighters' personal traumas and weaponize them through the media. Ring any bells? Vinny forced himself to stay quiet, but his mind was screaming. Tommy Castellanos had been the dry run, his first experiment in career assassination before he'd perfected the technique on Iron Mike. But Sarah didn't know about Tommy. Nobody knew about Tommy except Elizabeth Morrison sends her regards, by the way. The words hit Vinny like a right hook to the solar plexus. Morrison, the nurse he'd bribed in '87, the woman who'd sold him Tyson's psychiatric files for $2,000 and a promise of silence. She's been very cooperative, Park continued, her tone casual as a death sentence. Fascinating woman. Turns out she kept detailed records of all her transactions, dates, payments, photocopies of medical files. A real pack rat. Vinny's hands started shaking. Morrison had disappeared after the Tyson scandal broke. He'd assumed she'd fled the country, maybe died of old age. The idea that she was alive, talking, cooperating. "Where is she?" he whispered. "Safe house in Trenton. Federal protection, actually. She's been there for 6 months, ever since someone started asking questions about her old nursing job at Kathy's psychiatric services." The interrogation room felt like a coffin. Vinny could barely breathe. "Someone's been asking questions?" Anonymous letters started arriving at Morrison's apartment last winter. Very detailed questions about specific patients from the 1980s. Questions about Mike Tyson, about Tommy Castellanos, about you, Mr. Torino. Park leaned back in her chair, watching his face collapse like a controlled demolition. Morrison got scared, started thinking someone might want to silence her permanently. So she called the FBI, offered to cooperate in exchange for protection. Imagine our surprise when she told us about the nurse-for-hire operation she'd been running 37 years ago. "This is impossible," Vinny said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were false. Someone had been watching, waiting, gathering evidence. Someone who knew about both Tyson and Tommy, who understood the pattern he'd established decades ago. "Your daughter's been in the next room for 2 hours, Park said, shuffling through crime scene photos. "She keeps insisting she never hurt anyone physically. Keeps saying this is all about career destruction, not actual murder. But here's the thing, Mr. Torino. Marcus Rodriguez is dead, and his suicide note suggests otherwise. Can I see her? That depends. Are you ready to start telling the truth about 1987? About what you did to Mike Tyson? About what you and Sarah have been doing to fighters ever since?" Vinny closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 37 years pressing down on his chest. Someone had played them perfectly, turned Sarah's investigation into a murder weapon, transformed his buried past into present evidence, orchestrated their destruction with the same calculated precision he'd once used against others. The hunter had become the hunted, and the trap was closing fast.